Pledge of allegiance, roll call, agenda minutes.
All right, let's do roll call. Roll call, please.
Chairman Davis,
Present.
Chairman Lindsay,
Present.
Chairman May,
Present.
Chairman Drennan,
Present.
Chairman Weeks, President.
We have a quorum. Okay. Ask for a motion to approve the minutes from our February 13th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes held on February 13th.
Second. Any discussion? No discussion? Ask for an approval. Everybody say aye. They approve. Aye. Perfect. All right. Don't have the rest of the agenda here. Well, the first thing on the agenda was
Mr. Chairman, your first item was old business, discussion on amendments to subdivision regulations.
everybody remember what we talked about there?
There was a lot of conversation last time.
Yeah. Right.
So in essence, our subdivision ordinance says the moment you subdivide property, regardless of its size, you're responsible for extending utilities to your property. And we've got a property owner at Monteverde Lake who combined his lots, wants to uncombine them. And I've explained to him, you now have to bring sewer from Olympic Park to Monteverde Lake. And so there are other properties like this in the village where they're outside the range of existing services. This amendment would look at, if it's a total of 5 acres or less, you can subdivide your property. The conversation last time was, could we go back to the original subdivision? Could we have it at 1 acre? Some of these subdivisions aren't even an acre.
Correct.
You know, even though it's zoned R1, they're 21,000 square feet or less. So the idea was if you were a certain distance away from existing infrastructure, you would be exempt and you could do the administrative plating option as you can with lot combinations. The utility services off Via Del Rey, there was a question about those properties. There is sewer service at the corner of Torrey Pines and Via Del Rey. So I think those lots that were in question would not be far enough to meet the exemption. There's also sewer at the bottom of San Mateo and San Pedro, but there's another sewer main because that's part of the PID. They would have to extend that main that way. So trying to provide an option for homeowners or property owners, but also not creating a blank check for somebody to create a subdivision through these administrative processes. So I think the biggest question was if certain people would earn the exemption or not, because I think there's service at the top of Via Del Rey and Torrey Pines, that person would not meet the exemption. But the person at Monteverde Lake would. Yeah. And if there was any other further questions.
Yeah, I think some of the comments were made at that point were if you had already bought this land and this land was already purchased and already combined and this was all now one lot, and now you're a prospective buyer, you come in here and buy this knowing that all of these are already combined, and now all of a sudden they turn around and subdivide it. Now you got, instead of one person behind you, you could have however many. I know that was a concern that was brought up. And then there was some other concerns, and I can't remember what those were.
I think it was really, how else could we say it, is pretty much. Could we say we go back to the original subdivision, things of that nature? But I think providing the exemption the way it is, and you still have to comply with all the other state regs for water sewer, right? So you can't just subdivide a 2,000 square foot lot and put townhomes on it if it turns out that you can't satisfy an advanced septic system too. So by having that provision in as well, I think the village is going to be covered, that somebody's not going to sneak a brand new 40 lot subdivision smaller than what was originally planned.
And I think we also didn't talk about maybe doing it on a case by case basis.
We had discussed it only because there's numerous lots that are extremely large.
Right.
That weren't previously combined, but they're originally large and could be subdivided and still remain large. So that was a concern. Again, not a concern, but to your point, to not have it just a blanket statement to where you could then subdivide that large lot into a dozen towns.
If you wanted to, there are subdivision regulations I've worked with that talk about adjacency, that you can't combine this with additional subdivisions as well, so that I got 20 acres and I'm only gonna do 5 this year, and the next year I'm gonna do the next 5, and the next thing you know, you've got 4 or 5 acre subdivisions. You could have language added as your recommendation to prohibit adjacencies. Again, I think the idea is to make sure that nobody's using this to circumvent the rest of that chapter. If that's something at your discretion, I can draft something to forward to council as your recommendation.
Well, I'd like to, that's what I was gonna say, I'd like to see some options. So table this, but get some options so that we can review the options and make a more informed decision on how we would like to.
I can draft that. I want to make sure everything that you've got so far, if that's fine, what I'm really doing is adding another number 4, that this subdivision cannot be combined with adjacent subdivisions, is basically what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I don't want to see anybody attempting to circumvent
No, I agree.
or go against the spirit of what we intended,
Right.
and which negatively impacts adjacent property owners.
I'll add a draft language, it'll be a number 4 of that provision, addressing the adjacency prohibition, and bring it to you at the next meeting.
Sounds good. No other old business. We got new business. Item A, discussion.
Should there be a motion to table this?
It was just a discussion, but we never did move for the approval of it.
Okay.
So we can have a motion if you want to.
Motion to table?
Yeah.
Make a motion to table item A, old business, till further,
To the next
till the
meeting.
next meeting.
Second.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, now moving forward. Let's entertain a motion for the approval and discussion of a conditional use permit outside the storage, for outside storage in RV park out on Highway 64. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the RV storage and an RV park at 27554 Highway 64.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, you've got a revised site plan and color. This request originally was a space on the property, 100 by 100. It's now been expanded to 150 by 150. The applicant came in and got permits to do a remodel of the existing log cabin. They did secure permits to bring in temporary offices as it's on mixed use. They also got a legal permit for the fence, and they went ahead and screened it. This request is that within that fenced area, they would store their equipment and also place 3 RVs for staff to stay and house while the construction is going on. You've got a site plan, but it also shows a profile of the fence to show that it complies with the screening requirements for outside storage. My recommendation, should the Plan Commission move forward with this, is we put a time period on this conditional use so that when this construction is over, the investments for that use goes away, because that's really what it's tied to. The applicant is here if you have any questions for him as well, but I think you're looking at 2 years basically for the use of the property this way, that if we tied this into a 24-month permit from approval from council, that should cover the duration that they need. I will also add that, I mentioned this to some of you, the owner is actually extending water and sewer service to the property, so that service will remain. They are leveling the property with some fill, taking out all the ruts, but everything that they've got right now has been legally permitted. I want to say in March is when we got your addresses secure. So what they're asking for are the rights to store their equipment behind the fence, put the RVs up there as well. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Okay.
The extension of sewer, what does that mean? Just running pipes back to the original tank? Or
So-
what has that?
So there's water and sewer at Free Lane, so they're gonna come from Free Lane up towards the property. The property had been served by well service and septic, because there was no infrastructure for public, utilities. They are bringing in public utilities up this road to the southwest corner to provide, meters to connect into the property.
And sewage.
Correct.
Is there still a underground tank there?
I'm not sure, but the
No, I'm just wondering if
Just
it's
tank here.
addressed in the movement.
So I think that's an above ground tank, maybe a propane tank, behind the log
I
cabin.
don't
I
know.
would say those tanks were always above.
Really?
And metal pipe rises.
Okay.
There's a question on the exhibit about the metal pipe risers. What are those serving?
It's just like a survey mark.
A survey marker?
Yes.
Is there any way we could reduce this down to 3 months so we get the road done faster? Just throwing it out there for everybody.
I wish.
I do think so. Any other discussions? Do you have anything you would like to add to it?
No,
What's the plans after you're gone with, I mean, reseeding? Or is it just gonna look like a parking lot when you pull it and head out?
pretty much, yes.
Any other questions? So we're looking at a 2-year permit for this, correct?
Yes.
That's our
Additional
recommendation. Yes, sir.
Do we want something, say that it's just not a lot of land at the end, or put it back as it was, or what's the?
So the legal permits on the property are for the fence, the interior remodel, and for the temporary offices.
Right.
So when they're, and then this request is to add the RVs and the storage. So when the construction is done, the offices will go, the RVs will go, and the storage will go.
And
So
the fence is
it'll be,
Just
it'll just be a fence with a log cabin.
The fence will remain.
The fence can remain or it can be removed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a remove, it's just a temporary fence for
So
right
it
now.
needs.
So it is, yeah. Yeah, and the only other thing I'd like to clarify is I don't want to call it an RV park.
Well, by
There's-
code, that's what it is. It matches that definition
Does
in
it?
our, it does, because it's
They just-
it's a mobile,
Because
Dwelling.
my would be is somebody come back later, well, you already said it was an RV park, but 60 units out there.
that's why it's tied,
Well, the
that's why it's
variance.
timed to 2 years.
I realize that, but you already did it. Now, you did it for this guy, why can't I do it?
That person has to come back
I
and do the
agree.
same ask.
But
So it's
they
just,
still
this,
can, yeah.
this is not a blanket, runs with the land. This is tied to this project on a 2-year basis. And if somebody wants to return to make that request with that argument, that's fine. It still has to go through the public hearing process. It would have to go through you and be forwarded to council if you make a favorable recommendation. So, I think the concern would be this just runs forever and if someone, no, the way it's gonna be
You let
drafted
them do
is,
it, let me do it.
they'd have to make
That's
that
the only
case.
thing. Anybody else?
Well, you're gonna have fuel tanks there, fueling up
No.
equipment and all that?
No.
So no diesel?
All the fuel
inside?
tanks are gonna be in our crusher pit.
Okay.
Okay,
It's strictly just storage and
Yes.
just housing and storage.
just housing. No real work going on out there.
No, other than, we're leveling off the property right now, but that's it.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion,
Do we need to amend the motion for the time frame?
And the fence.
I think you need to amend it for the fence, and you should amend it for the time frame.
okay. So, who would like to make that motion?
Jeff made the motion. Would you like to amend
I make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for outside storage and RV park at 27554 Highway 64. With the conditions that this conditional use will expire at 24 months and ensure that the temporary fence is removed at that time. Moving forward.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving on to the discussion and approval of a zoning amendment for property zoned R1 to O2 for track D2 and track F of Chalet Unit 1A, amending and compromising approximately 165.9 acres. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the zoning amendment for the property zone, for tracks D2 and tract F for a zoning change from R1 to O2.
Do I have a second?
I'll just say that.
Okay, let's open it up for discussion.
I thought this was track.
Track E is already zoned O2, so it's the two tracks that come down the slope that are zoned R1. And I think they were
Then some
renumbered E.
correspondence that we got, I thought it was E.
I think there is an
Yeah,
E, but I think
It
E
says, on the application, it says, track D2, E2, and F.
I think E is already zoned O2.
Okay, when I look at it, I don't see a subdivision plot. Right? Just, E is on the left.
I think that got renumbered though. I think the tracks were relabeled. And the applicant is also here as well. Mr. Chairman, this is on the subdivision map, D2 and F, and E is at the top. E is at the top of the ridge. That's already zoned O2.
That's already zoned at the okay.
D2, E, and F. They own E,
Right.
but E has already got an O2 zoning district on it. So the request is to extend the zoning to D2 and F.
Okay.
So originally, when they
Because
made
when
the
you say,
application,
yeah, the bridge to nowhere. blah,
yes,
blah,
it's, so
blah.
it's the.
I'm
bridge to
not
nowhere
going,
is here.
well, I thought it was just.
Originally, the applicant included that, and when we reviewed the application, that's already got the zoning that they were requesting.
Right.
So it's this piece and this
That
piece.
piece.
That's correct.
Makes that a lot more sense.
Yes, so it still comes off the bridge from nowhere, and it's hard to delineate where is that zoning line for O2 to R1 on the ridge.
Right.
And so if this has the zoning to match, and this has the zoning to match, I think the advantage from the village, if you're looking at housing, you now have 5,000 square foot lot minimums instead of 21,000 square foot lot minimum. You have service already coming across the bridge. You do have sewer mains that aren't used, but you do have sewer mains in Elvado going up to Valley Buttes. So that's why this request is just for these two pieces, because the top one's already got the O2 zone.
Now,
So on this, they've got, there's no sewer from here down to, where is it, right there at the golf course entrance?
Village Park.
yeah,
That's, so there's that whole, whatever, 1.2 miles or something right there that has nothing.
Correct.
So,
If they choose to subdivide after this request, that gives them the opportunity for smaller lots. They are aware of the issue with sewer, that they would still have to be.
they would have to put
That's
in,
correct.
okay, I just,
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody's clear on that because we thought we were clear on it once before, and we weren't.
No, and I think the applicant had some folks looking at the property, and we shared with them at that time. You've got water service, you've got sewer service, but sewer has not been extended into the larger network.
Right.
So, I think this helps in a number of ways. Again, it's hard to identify where on the ridge does the line change from zoning. So let's just run it all the way down. You still have residential allowance in an O2 like you do have in the R1. The difference is your lot sizes change dramatically. And I think that some of the folks that have been looking at this property are looking at, I don't need 21,000 square feet for one building site. I can do something just as comparable on smaller lots, but it does still require whatever main extensions need to be made. So you have flexibility that they could still do 21,000 square foot lots, but they have the option to go to something lower because the standard is a minimum of 5,000. You can have a 1 acre lot, and that still meets code, but now you've just got more flexibility on the development rights on it. We're not waiving any residential rights; those still remain, but we're also providing commercial rights and smaller lots.
So it's not just residential, it opens it up to multifamily.
Yes, whatever, all the allowances that you have in O2, if you look, O2 is right here off North 85 Road behind the bank,
Right.
and you saw a site plan for townhomes, that would be allowed in an O2 district. So when folks say multifamily, it's really, what we've seen in the last 3 years is really more townhomes attached
Well, I
and
mean,
not apartment complexes.
Any other discussion?
is this that area that, once had was planned for, yeah, Marriott, all that stuff?
The Ruth Chris,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's below, we owned that property and sold it, but it's the one that's closer to the road on the, down below.
Okay.
Olive Garden is about Ruth Chris.
Did they? Yeah, I didn't know that.
Hey,
You heard it here. It's live.
Marketing machine.
No other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Motion carries. Okay. The last one on
You're
the,
just burning through this.
Well, it's a hard dead stop at 2, so.
right. Discussion and approval for a zoning amendment to Mountain View Boulevard North Overlay District on Lot 1A amended and tracts of land located within the Moreno Valley Land Third Subdivision comprising approximately 1.6 acres at the northwest corner of the intersection of Halo Pine Terrace and Mountain View Boulevard.
I make a motion to approve the
Zoning amendment to Mountain View Boulevard.
zoning amendment to Lot 1 amended, Moreno Valley Third Subdivision comprising approximately 1.6 acres.
You also need to include there's tracks. There's only one platted lot, and parts right along Halo Pines are 2 tracks. So that's the reason why the language was drafted. So don't forget the tracks.
Lot 1 amended and tracts of land located within the Moreno Valley Third Subdivision comprising of 1.6 acres. The northeast corner of intersection of Halo Pines Terrace and Mountain View Boulevard.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, let's open it up for discussions.
What is the zoning amendment?
So the zoning amendment, Mr. Chairman, when we drafted the cannabis retail ordinance, for those properties located within the overlay, we limited those properties to be on the west side of 434, because that's where water and sewer connections are. And in the overlay, we had conversations about residential uses because there's an apartment above Zeb's. And we didn't want that apartment to trigger a buffer around Zeb's, because Zeb's is really a commercial slot. This request comes to the property on the east side of 434, but it's limited to 300 linear feet north of Halo Pines Terrace. So it doesn't extend all the way up the east side of 434. It's just that intersection where 434 and Halo Pines Terrace meet. When we originally discussed cannabis sales and we were looking to put it along the overlay, there was concern about proximity to the ball fields and proximity to the school. Because the zoning districts over there change, because it's not all commercial. There's the schools, I think, an R3, and there's a wedge piece that comes close to the ball fields. This request, however, does not have residential zone districts around it at all. And it would have the same exemption for a residential use in a mixed use district, as opposed to a C1, a C2, where we have it by conditional use. There's a trigger with your proximity to a residential use in a residential zoning district. In the overlay, where we discussed some of these buildings are going to have both, but we don't want that to automatically create a buffer when it's really a commercial corridor. The idea of this request is to come back with a conditional use permit for the ice cream shop. That would where another application would come. That application cannot come before you because right now cannabis sales is limited to the west side of 434. What I've tried to do with this language is not give it a blanket on both sides of 434, still being conscious about the concerns people had about the ball fields and schools. So that's why it's there's a measurement of 300. You got to be within 300 feet on the north side of Halo Pines Terrace. So that's really capturing the bakery, the offices, the ice cream shop. We've had no emails, phone calls, faxes, in opposition to this request. We do have one letter of support. You've got a copy of that.
Isn't there residents right there also?
Again, in the overlay, the trigger is a residentially zoned district, not a residential use, because the overlay has mixed residential and commercial. Otherwise, we would zone it out of everything in the overlay, and I don't think that was the intent. So I do remember when we did this, we were pressured by the state. We had to have something in before the end of the year. We did. We were advised by council that, hey, if you need to look at it again, you have every right to look at it again. No one has had any request to come and look at this until today. So I do want to be mindful that it's not a complete, everything up and down 434 is now open for business. It's limited to that intersection, 300 feet off Halo Pines Terrace.
Didn't the state have a distance away from things like the school and everything like that? Wasn't it?
That's
Very,
correct.
very small.
It's 300 feet.
Yeah. So how does that affect
So
this particular thing?
So the state has standards. It's got to be 300 feet from a church or a school. We have the discretion to add to that, and you did. You added I think the state was daycares and churches. We added schools. So they have done a cannabis survey similar to a liquor license survey. There's not a daycare, church, or school within 300 feet of this request. So you would see that when the conditional use permit is formally made, subject to you approving the allowance for that to happen. But to answer your question, there is a standard from the state and one from the Village of Angel Fire. There's nothing within that zone that's a church, a daycare, or a school. And we did not want to create another buffer with other establishments similar to selling cannabis. If they wanted to be together, they could be together. If they want to be apart, that's fine.
So after all the discussions that we had spent hours on this, and we decided on what we were going to do. And the very first person that comes in wants an amendment.
This is the second.
They didn't want nobody. This is the First Amendment.
This is the First Amendment. That's correct.
The first one complied.
So it got a conditional use. It was in the overlay. It was not near a church, a daycare, or a school. That applicant is actually subdividing that property into 12 lots. They've made that application so that they would still be on the lot that was approved by the conditional use permit, but now other businesses could be developed or offices could be developed. The design is for a cul-de-sac to come in through the middle, provide water and sewer up that cul-de-sac to service that. So they are still progressing to actually come in for a building permit. There was no time limit on that application either. So this is the first request to amend it, but it would be the second request for cannabis sales.
My next question on that is, generally amendments are through hardship and that sort of stuff. Where's the hardship?
Amendments to the zoning ordinance are not, that's a variance where you have hardships to the property. Anyone is entitled to make a request for a zoning amendment. It just requires public hearings. So they have made their application and paid their fee. The property owner is here as well. If you have questions of him, the applicant for cannabis sales is here as well. I think the proprietor who wants to sell cannabis, that's another conversation. The conversation right now is just, do we want to limit it to this intersection as well? And again, the property owner is here if you have questions.
So just a question. I saw on Facebook that there was a business opening up in the ice cream store selling cannabis. It was on. No, exactly. But it was said that it was going to be open and that sort of stuff. So a bit presumptuous in that situation. So.
You can say anything on Facebook. Yeah. Anything.
May I say something? I'm the one that applied. We did search for 6 months on the other side of the highway. The main concern was that the church, the Cova Art Center, kind of blocks because everything is within 300 feet that you can rent there. So the Seton building is within 300 feet of that church. The Chamber of Commerce there is also within 300 feet of that church. And we wanted to stay within the bounds, but it was kind of very hard until I saw the overlay on the other side of the highway and decided to kind of pursue this side of it. So it was just very difficult. The only other option would be to buy a piece of land like the other company did and start from scratch. So we were trying to avoid that. And then we are local as well. So we do have a micro producer license down in Guadalupe. So everything is going to stay, between here and there. And, we definitely want to help out the community.
But there are pieces of land available that conform.
Right.
And I'll just say my concern really is only that, like the other commissioners there, we did spend hours on it, and to rezone it for one specific property. If we're gonna do that, we need to relook at the whole thing, because we're gonna be in here, again. The other is, when, I thought the spirit when it was said, well, the state required churches, daycares, I didn't realize it was residentially zoned. I thought it was residences.
So we have two standards. One is proximity to a residential district, and one is proximity to a residential use. And the reason we have two standards is because you have a mixture in the overlay. And I think we wanted to encourage it on 434 in the overlay where you want all your other commercial activities to be. But we didn't want to all of a sudden exclude a lot of properties because you have a building that's got a mix in it. But once we got out of the overlay and the C1s and the C2s, that's where the other standard came in of districts and uses. So you're right, there was a lot of conversations about it because our zoning districts are blended, if you will. And so not providing a spot and still having these protections, that was a long conversation, absolutely.
Yeah, it was. Actually happened twice. Any other comments?
Yeah, I would have to just agree that, if we're gonna look at, rather than do a zoning change on just this particular district, we look at everything, take a good hard look at it first and see what,
If
See if
you
we
wanted to
change that zoning, where, is there more areas that would accommodate that?
again, you have discretion to prepare a recommendation if you see fit. One of the other thoughts I had was to run from Halo Pines to Flamingo, because that's both on the east side. There are services, but there's a dead stop at Flamingo, and it doesn't really go up farther.
But it does on the west side.
Correct, it does on the west side, but
You're
not on the east.
concerned about the ballparks, or
Right.
concerned with the ballparks. So I would honestly be more comfortable with something like that. I don't like rezoning for one specific property.
If that's the discretion you'd like to take to council, that's well within your right. And we were originally I was looking to do a Flamingo to Halo Pines, but there were some concerns about just blanket across. So that's why you had a restrictive proposal before you. But if you want to run it from Flamingo to Halo Pines Terrace, in between, I would recommend north side of Halo Pines Terrace, south side of Flamingo, so that there's not any ambiguity that you can keep going up 434. I don't know of another stop past Flamingo that still provides a buffer around the ball fields. But Flamingo is a pretty hard street to recognize as a good delineation.
You can go all the way anyhow because you can't do anything within 300 feet of the ballpark. So.
The ballparks is not a school, so
You can't.
but I don't think folks felt comfortable having it close to the ballparks. Having it across 434 from the ballparks is one thing, but having it adjacent to the ballparks is another. So I think if you extended it to Flamingo and Halo Pines, you still have a good buffer in between them and the ballparks. So if that's a recommendation you prefer to take, I think that's well within your discretion to do so. This still has to go to council, and then you would, if it is approved, you still would have to see an application for that conditional use to come back.
Any other discussion? Okay, as the motion was made, all in favor, say aye.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, real quick. Did you want to amend your motion?
That's why I was going with
Okay.
this. And so if we say aye, we're going with what Jeff stated a while ago. If we want to amend the motion, then we need to amend it and then reconsider it. So,
I'm not really ready to amend it all the way to table. I'd rather look at it.
that's,
Yeah, that's
make that
that's
amendment then.
Okay. So,
So the motion right
So
now
we
is.
still have to kill it.
Yeah, so what you do is you table it, and go further discussion on looking at the whole thing as a whole unit instead of one piece. Or however we want to look at it. Revisit the entire process, or the entire, what we've got set up.
I'm not gonna make an amendment to the motion.
Yeah, we could just vote on this and then revisit the
So you would need a new motion to reconsider this and table it to your next meeting.
I'll make a motion to table the approval of the zoning amendment to the Mountain View Boulevard North Overlay District on Lot 1 amended in tracts of land located within the Moreno Valley Land Third Subdivision, comprising approximately 1.6 acres, the northeast corner of intersection of Halo Pines Terrace and Mountain View Boulevard, and relook at the zoning within the overlay district.
From Flamingo to Halo Pines, or just.
Just leave it open. Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. With no other things on the agenda, seek a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're done. Thanks for everybody showing up.